When I was adopted over back in 1972 to the United States, I was 6 going on 7 years old. I was given over to a Mongolian family, which is also part of my heritage. And the particular group of Mongolian people that I was given over to were called Kalmyks. Kalmyks or Kalmyk-Mongolians. And they were situated in a tri-state area in the eastern part of the United States, which is namely Philadelphia, New York, and New Jersey. And so in this tri-state area, the Kalmyk-Mongolians were living and made it their home, because it was very difficult for them to live in their homeland and practice religion with the onslaught of the Stalinist regime and the communist regime in Russia at that time. So the Kalmyks, who were traditionally Buddhist, immigrated over to Europe, from Europe immigrated over to New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia. And the Kalmyks are very strong in their practice and faith of Buddhism, as they have been for many centuries. And therefore, in New Jersey itself, they had established 4 very beautiful Buddhist temples, and they also have it in Philadelphia. And so when I was adopted over to the United States, I went to Howell, New Jersey. And Howell, New Jersey had a large community of immigrant Mongolian people, Kalmyk people, Kalmyk Mongols, and they had settled there and built their temples. So in Howell, New Jersey, there was 3 Kalmyk Mongolian Buddhist temples. And then in North Jersey, in Washington, New Jersey, this was in the northern part of the state of New Jersey, there was a Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center that was opened and developed by the Mongolian Geshe Ngawang Wangyal. So what happened was, all of the Mongolians would attend regular temple service, rituals, holidays, prayers. Whenever there was a Buddhist holiday, such as Tsongkhapa's Day, then people would attend and engage in prayers. The monks would chant and do rituals, and the lay people would sit in the temple and recite mantras while they turned the prayer wheel. And that was one of my favorite times of going to the temple. I visited all 3 temples in Howell, New Jersey, and whenever I had free time, I would particularly go to Nitsan Temple and Rashi Jempeling Temple. And Rashi Jempeling Temple is the seat of my first teacher, Geshe Lobsan Tarchen. Later, he became the abbot, and he was known as Kensra Lobsan Tarchen Rinpoche. So, Rashi Jempeling Temple, which is built by the Kalmyk-Mongolian people in the community there, was built, sustained, maintained by the Mongolian Kalmyk community there. It's a very beautiful temple. And I would go there for services, for prayers, for classes, and whatnot. And that was literally 5-minute bike ride from my house. If I was to walk, it would be about 10 to 15 minutes, because it was very, very nearby. So I was very, very fortunate. And the Mongolian community in Washington, New Jersey, the Mongol Geshe in Washington, New Jersey, of the Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center, and the Kalmyk Mongols of New York and Philadelphia and New Jersey, all combined, and invited His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1979 to the United States. And this was spearheaded by the great Mongolian master, Geshe Wangyal. And so Geshe Wangyal made the arrangements, he made the requests, and he made the preparations. And naturally, all of the Mongolian people who have been connected to the Dalai Lama for many centuries, all the various Dalai Lamas for many centuries, were very excited. And I remember that His Holiness came in 1979. He visited all 3 temples of Nitsan and Chashi Lumpo Huru and Rashi Jambaling Temple. He visited all the 3 temples in Howell, New Jersey, and he graciously also visited the Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center in Washington, New Jersey. And what was very exciting was we all took a bus. The Mongolian people chartered a bus, many buses to Washington, New Jersey. And I think it was about a 2-hour ride, not too far, pleasant ride to Washington, New Jersey, which has a large piece of land up at the base of the Appalachian Mountains. And it was very green and forested. And Geshe Wangyal had a special house and residence built for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Then he had his temple, he had his own residence there. And while we were there, they were in the process of building a lake. And he had tents set up all over the land. And he had reception centers, and he had a beautiful area to receive His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all the people there. And I can't remember exactly how many people, because back there in 1979, I was 14. So I think at least there would be 400 to 500 persons there, maybe even more. Because I know among the Kalmyk Mongols, there's at least 300 to 400 persons. And so we were very excited because Geshe Wangyal invited His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Washington Center. And under the auspices, the sponsorship, and the spearheading of Geshe Wangyal. And it was really exciting because when we arrived by bus there, we had a chance to meet Geshe Wangyal. It was the first time that I had met this Kalmyk-Mongolian master. And he gave me his blessings. And by that time, he was already much older. I don't know how old, but he was much older. And I remember his distinctive white goatee. And of course, he spoke fluent Mongolian and Tibetan and some English. And the whole place was set up so beautifully. The main picture that was set up outside was the Buddha Nagaraja. And that had a white head and a blue body, which is one of the Buddhas of the 35 Confessional Buddha Sutra. And there was many offerings everywhere and beautiful tents, and a throne was set up outside. And it was absolutely a beautiful, cool day. I think it was around September. So it was already early fall. So it was not cold, but it was cool. And it was very, very crisp and very clear and very nice. And His Holiness had already been resting in his room. And the next thing we knew was Geshe Wangyal, in a traditional manner with incense, invited His Holiness the Dalai Lama out of his room and to the throne and dais where he was going to give the teachings under a tent outdoors. And it was a very beautiful moment. And His Holiness came out and he sat on the throne, and Geshe Wangyal made the traditional prostrations and offerings, and everybody sat down. And I remember when His Holiness arrived, there was a very light, misty rain. Nobody got wet. It was just a very light mist appear, and there was rainbows all over the place. There was just rainbows, and then there was a little white butterfly that kept hovering around His Holiness's head, not landing on the Dalai Lama's head or not falling on the Dalai Lama's head, but just hovering around it for, I think about 15-20 minutes, and then flew away. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama proceeded to give us teachings on the 8 verses of thought transformation. And he gave explanations on each of the 8 verses. And on top of that, he gave an explanation how to meditate on it. And he advised us to recite the 8 verses every single day, which I started to do from that time onwards. And he also gave us the oral transmission of Avalokiteshvara's mantra, Chenezik's mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. So it was very, very beautiful. And if I remember, the teachings was about 2 to 3 hours. And I cried throughout most of the teachings because I felt very happy to receive these teachings. And they felt very familiar, and they felt very appropriate. I felt the teachings were very appropriate and very familiar and comfortable, for lack of a better description of how I felt. And so afterwards, we all lined up, and we had the fortune to go up personally and offer a kata, a white silk traditional greeting scarf to His Holiness and receive his blessings. And he gave each of us a hand blessing, which is he places his hand on our head, and also a red string that has been tied in a knot in the center, which contains blessed mantras blown on by His Holiness. So I was extremely excited. And I remember before this, I had taken 2 or 3 weeks to paint a poster of the four-armed Avalokiteshvara. And I painted the Avalokiteshvara, and I painstakingly put a lot of details and all that on it. And on the back, I composed a prayer. I composed a prayer to praise His Holiness the Dalai Lama and his indivisibility with Avalokiteshvara. And I prayed that I would be close to him and not be separated from him in this life and future lives. So I composed that prayer in my little childish writing, and then I wrote it on the back of the painting, and I had this all prepared. So when I went to see His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I offered this painting up, and he graciously accepted it. And I flipped it to the back, and he was reading it, and I was holding people up in line, and people were kind of giving me that look that I'm holding them up in line. So I said to His Holiness, he can read it later. He doesn't have to read it now because there's a lot of people waiting, and he smiled. And so he accepted the painting, and that was my first meeting with His Holiness in New Jersey. And so besides meeting him in Howell, of course, briefly, and after that was done, we had our lunch there, and there were so many Kalmyk people there. There were so many Kalmyk kids, and all of my relatives were there. And it was just a very beautiful, wonderful day. And we went to say thank you to Geshe Wangyal for all of this. And we took our bus and went back to New Jersey, and that was that. And you have to understand that for many years, since I was 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, I wanted to study Buddhism very deeply. I wanted to become a Buddhist monk. I wanted to go to the mountains to meditate. And for years, I would be in my house in Howell, New Jersey, my family house, and I would often paint or draw or use crayons to color in that different paintings, different drawings, and different illustrations of mountains and people meditating in mountains and people seeing Buddhas while they're meditating, having visions of Buddhas, having visions of their personal yidams or meditational deities. So I'd be drawing this and I'd be visualizing this and fantasizing about this for many, 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 many years, even as a child. I felt very familiar with meditating in the mountains. I felt very familiar with monks, and I felt that I should be wearing robes. I felt that the robes were the appropriate clothes for me, and also that I should be among monks. I felt very much like an outsider to be with lay people, and I felt very comfortable with monks. So I would often go to the nearby temples, the Kalmyk temples, to be with monks, talk with the monks, and visit them as much as possible. As much as my mother would allow me, she was very restrictive on that. And so after I saw the Washington Center, it made a very deep impact on me. And I thought, what a beautiful place to live. What a beautiful place to stay, because it's an Appalachian mountain base. It's filled with trees and it's green. And how lovely it would be if I can go there and live there, become ordained as a monk, and study there. And I thought about that. And so what happened was, I've had many, many problems with my parents due to a lot of issues my mother had had with my father, which I will not get into at this time. She was a very disturbed and unhappy and very angry woman, although she was a very kind woman. She was a good person, but because of her tumultuous relationship with her husband, my stepfather, it often disturbed her mental equilibrium. It often disturbed her mind, and she was not at peace. And I would be the brunt of her unhappiness, where I would receive a lot of, I would say, scoldings and physical abuse, beatings and all that for many, many years. And I took it because I did love her. But my yearning was to go to the temple, was to study at the temple, and she was 100% against that. Although being a very staunch and strong Buddhist herself, I was her only son. She adopted me to be her son. So it's not Kalmyk tradition to let your only son go and join the Sangha. If you had 3, 4, 5 sons, you can perhaps spare one son, for lack of a better word, to the monasteries, as it was Mongolian tradition and also Tibetan tradition. So in any case, as being the only son, I wasn't allowed to become a monk or study Buddhism. I would have to stay in secular way of life, which I totally rejected. So my conflict with my mom also became stronger because of that. And as a result, I ran away from home many times, where I literally packed my stuff when she wasn't around, and I would get on the bus and go to various parts of the United States. And so one of my earlier attempts of running away was when I was 14. I mean, I had run away earlier than that, but that was earlier attempts of running away, because I'd run away at 11, I'd run away at 12, 14, 15, 16. I'd run away many times because I really wanted to go study Buddhism. And so when I was around 14, 15, around that time, I remember that I had a fallout with my mom. She wouldn't allow me to go to the temple to receive teachings from my teacher anymore, the temple where Rashi Jembalin. So I decided to leave. When she wasn't around, I had packed my bags and I had left home. And when I had left, it was in winter, and it was snowing, and there was a lot of snow in New Jersey. The snow is very big amounts. You know, it could be 2 or 3 foot of snow back then. And so what I had done, I packed my bags, and I wanted to go to Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center. And that's what I did. I packed my bags and I went to Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center, and I got on the bus, and then I somehow arrived in Washington, New Jersey. And then when I arrived in Washington, New Jersey, this was like half a year, 1 year later, when I had run away, I forgot the name of the place where Geshe Wangyal was, and I forgot the name of the center and all that. So I went to the public library in Washington, New Jersey, and it was open. There was a very lovely librarian there. And I had not told her that I'd run away or anything. I just said that I am looking for a Tibetan Buddhist temple in Washington, New Jersey. And she had heard of it. So she went on to do some search. You know, back then they had microfiche, and they had these microfiche machines. And she went on a search, and she found some newspaper articles. And then from that, she found the location of Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center and the telephone number and all of that. And she gave it to me. And I was ever so grateful. So I went to her phone booth and I called up the Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center in my youthful innocence, and I requested to talk to Geshe Wangyal. The lady on the phone was very kind, and she said to me that Geshe Wangyal is not here at this time because it's winter, and that he had gone to Florida, where he usually goes every winter, because it's drier and hotter, and it was easier for his arthritis. So needless to say, I was very disappointed, but I still said to her, she asked me what did I want, and I said I wanted Geshe Wangyal's permission to join the Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center and become a monk and study and stay there. So the lady on the phone said to me she couldn't make that decision for me, and that I should call back in a short while, that she would call Geshe and seek his advice. So I think I waited about an hour, and I called back, and the lady on the phone said that she had contacted Geshe in Florida, Geshe Wangyal, and he had said that he's very happy to see my energy and my strength of will to practice Buddhism. But in America, I would need my parents' permission, since I was a minor, to stay at his center. And that without my parents' permission, it would be illegal for him to allow me to stay at his center, although he was very happy to hear that I wanted to study Buddhism. And so he had said to me to promise him to go back home and seek my parents' permission and not stay in Washington, and to be safe at home and study at a later time. And that he would lend me $50 to do so. And the $50 was for me to stay in a hotel and the next day take a bus trip back to Howell, New Jersey, which was in the South. So because such a great master had said that to me through his assistant, this lady, I don't remember the lady's name, I reluctantly agreed. So this lady drove down to the center of Washington town, because they're kind of in the outskirts in the mountains, and she talked to me and she listened to me, and I told her how much I wanted to study Buddhism, how much I wanted to become a monk, and how disappointed I am that I cannot join the Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center. And she said to me that Geshe-la is very sympathetic to my plight. He's very sympathetic to what I wish to do, but America does have very strict laws and this would not be allowed. And she said to me that I've been instructed to pass $50 to you, and are you going to take this, stay in a hotel and rest, and then take a bus back tomorrow and be safe? Do you promise to do this? Geshe-la wants you to promise. So I said to her, I promise. So she gave me $50, and then I went to a hotel, a cheap hotel at that time to stay. I think it was $20, $30. And I thought about it. And I thought, well, since I promised this master, although he's not my teacher, that I would do that, I would have to do that. So the next day, I took a bus back to New Jersey, to Howell, New Jersey, and I went back home. And well, I was in big trouble, and there was a lot of scolding and beatings and screaming and shouting and the usual, and that I have endured for many years. And my mother, I told her what I did, and she was not pleased, needless to say. So that was my first encounter and second encounter or association with Geshe-la. And it was many years later, many years later, that His Holiness the Dalai Lama again visited. I think it was, let me see. His Holiness the Dalai Lama again visited the Geshe Wangyal Center. That was back in 1987. So it was 8 years later, he visited the Tibetan Learning Center again in Washington, New Jersey. And I went up there. And this time I was around 21, 22 years old. And I had a short blessing from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And at that time, I requested him that I wish to become a monk and if he can ordain me. And this has been captured on video, which I'll include here. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama accepted, and he was very happy, and he was very pleased. And he said that if I come to India, it will be no problem. He'll ordain me into the Buddhist monkhood. And I accepted. I was very, very excited. So in Geshe Wangyal Center of Tibetan Buddhist Learning, the Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center, Geshe Wangyal's place in Washington, New Jersey, is where I met the Dalai Lama again in 1987, and where I requested to become ordained. So it was right at that spot in this Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center. And so it was in Geshe Wangyal Center again that I requested to become a monk. And later I flew to India in 1987 to become a Buddhist monk. So when I arrived in India, I went to Dharamsala, and I was in Dharamsala, and I had audience with His Holiness, and I was officially ordained. So that was my little bit of association and connection or interaction with the great Buddhist master, Geshe Wangyal. I thought I would share that here on this blog post. It would be somewhat appropriate. Thank you very much, Tsem Rinpoche.